Do you want to build your brand by being a guest on industry-leading podcasts? If you're a business leader, an author, or a speaker, my guess is that you do. Picture this. You, a dynamic executive easily connecting with engaged audiences, turbocharging your top-of-funnel marketing, and creating a treasure trove of content with every episode. Podcasting is a game changer that you've been waiting for. And podcastally.com is your VIP ticket to podcast PR success. Say goodbye to the ordinary and hello to the extraordinary exposure. Let the Podcast Ally team connect you with the best-in-class podcast for you to be a guest on. Head over to podcastally.com and use the promo code DT for a 10% discount on Podcast Ally services. That's podcastally.com, promo code DT. Welcome to High Octane Leadership with Donald Thompson. This season, we're diving deeper with more solo episodes, where I'll share the experiences that have led to recognition by EY, Forbes, Fast Company, and others. Not as a boast, but as milestones on my entrepreneurial path. From growing multi-million-dollar firms to successful business exits and building high-performance teams with a global perspective. I'll reveal the insights and strategies from my journey and share them with you so that we can win together. Alongside these solo episodes, we'll have industry visionaries and thought leaders, and we'll explore effective leadership. Ready to empower your leadership journey with real success stories? Let's embark on this transformational journey together. Today, we're going to get into a topic that is really starting to transform the way we think about leadership, organizational growth, what it means to be a successful leadership in terms of your leadership team, and that is inclusive leadership. One of the things that we'll talk about today, and we're going to dig into this a little bit, is that what creates an environment where workplace excellence exists. And what we found at the diversity movement, what I found through my consulting practice and different things that I've been doing, is inclusive leadership is the cornerstone to the long-term growth we're all seeking. In today's rapidly evolving workplace, the significance of inclusive leadership has never been more pronounced. Inclusive leadership ensures that every team member feels valued, heard, and empowered to contribute their unique perspectives and talents. This type of leadership not only fosters a sense of belonging and respect among diverse individuals, but also drives innovation, enhances team performance, supports organizational resilience, and many other elements required to win in a new economy. In this episode, we'll delve into the principles of inclusive leadership and explore how leaders can cultivate an environment where diversity is not just accepted, but it's celebrated and leveraged for the collective success. Our conversation is going to cover some of the challenges and rewards of practicing inclusive leadership. It's really important for us to get granular because when we're using buzzword salad that's available today, we can lose context of what are the tangible impacts of inclusivity on both the individual and organizational effectiveness. So join us as we unravel the complexities leading inclusivity into a diverse world, sharing insights and experiences that are really going to shed a light, illuminate, if you will, the path that we're all on to becoming inclusive leaders. So now let's define inclusive leadership. Inclusive leadership is a strategic approach that emphasizes creating an environment where all employees feel valued and have an opportunity to contribute and succeed. One of the things that it still baffles me a little bit is how we often think we're so different from one another. When in all honesty, when we really break things down, we're all really trying to do good at work, be paid well for what we do, provide for our families, friends, partners, create an environment where we can save some money, one day retire, and maybe drive a new whip every now and then. Most people want similar things, but the things that make us different get all the attention and create an environment where we're pulling away from each other, versus diving together to create something that's lasting and powerful. So when we talk about the definition of inclusive leadership, that approach that allows us to create that environment where all employees feel valued, I want us to think about a lot of other experiences that make that case. If you go into a department store and someone greets you when you come in, asks you if they can help you, what are you looking for? Do you have a special occasion? But makes you feel like you belong, you're more likely to spend more money there. When you go to a restaurant and the food is good, the ambiance, the music, the wine is just right, but you leave there feeling that for the dollars you invested, you got a great experience. You're more willing to go back to that restaurant again, be a repeat customer, and tell people about it. It's no different in the workplace. When you are approached and go through the interview process and everyone's talking about all the goodness that you can do together, and you get to that first day of work and your computer and your technology works. You have a gift package, you have a note from the leadership. You have someone that takes you out to lunch your first day or your first week on the job. Your manager has a set of tasks that you can not only do, but that you can see value in your first 30, 60, 90 days within the organization. You as an individual feel that belonging, feel that connectivity to the organization, feel that value. And that creates an environment where you can do your best work, where you can contribute, where you can succeed. In all of those examples, whether it's a restaurant, whether it is a department store, whether it is your first day of work, your environment plays a significant role on whether or not you feel that you belong, that you feel valued, that you feel like you have the ability and opportunity to contribute. And so I was looking at some research by McKinsey. There was a direct correlation between inclusive leadership and the increase in organizational performance, including measurable financial outcomes. The ability to enhance effective leadership starts with leaders recognizing that the demographics in the world today have changed significantly. The way people need to be talked to, approached, uplifted, mentored, sponsored has changed significantly. And so inclusive leadership at its most simple form promotes broad participation in decision making, fairness in performance evaluations, opportunities for connection and exposure for a rising set of employees across different and more diverse groups to be able to participate in a meaningful way in the growth of the business. On the flip side of the coin, it is very difficult for people to feel that belonging, feel welcomed, feel like they can do their best work if they're not given feedback to help them grow, but given feedback that tears them down. If they're having to work through and overcome microaggressions and different types of biases that undermine inclusivity efforts and thus don't create an environment where inclusive leadership exists. As the demographic makeup of the workforce continues to change, the role of inclusive leadership will only grow in importance. Future leaders must be adept at managing a diverse workforce, generationally diverse, a global workforce, folks that are from different backgrounds. All of these things are required for you to gain true innovation, true collaboration, and true best-in-class performance against your competition. So now let's get a little bit focused and talk about 10 areas, 10 points around inclusive leadership. One, why is it critical in today's business landscape? Inclusive leadership gives you the opportunity to work with effectively a broad construct of people. It also takes in consideration those demographic shifts in the marketplace so that you can move from Gen Z to Gen X, working with somebody that's blind or low vision, working with somebody that is in Canada, you may be in the US, someone that's in India, whether it is generational, global, or learning how to manage individuals that may need a little more time on a meeting agenda, for example, because they are neurodiverse. Someone that is a working single parent that may need a little bit more schedule flexibility. Why is inclusive leadership important today? Because the world has changed and leadership practices need to keep up to lead in this moment. Number two, how does inclusive leadership differ from general leadership practices? It really doesn't, quite frankly. If you think about a great coach, let's just use basketball, for example. You have different players from different backgrounds. You have folks that are different in the position they play on a team. In order to be a successful leader at any time in our history, you have to have the ability to work with people that are different ways of thinking, different experiences, different skill sets. If you are a leader and have a leadership team, you may have someone that's strong in finance, somebody that's strong in sales, somebody that's strong in marketing, somebody that's strong in technology, legal, compliance, HR, and the list goes on and on. Your goal as a leader is to meld those monumental talents together to create a straightforward approach to grow your business. The difference is leadership in the past was able to be much more command and control. I give you money, you do what I say. Inclusive leadership, especially as we're dealing in more and more knowledge workers and in the land of new ideas and innovation, the difference now in being an effective leader is we have to have the ability to pull the greatness out of people versus drive excellence through people. Most people aren't going to stay and thrive and prosper in an environment where they're dictated to versus an environment they are discussing things with their leader. A third element I'll share with you is an experience where inclusive leadership had a significant impact on me. I remember this has been 30 years now. I'm 52, let's see, not 20 plus years, 20 years. My mentor friend, Grant Willard, asked me if I was free for lunch. I said, sure. He said, well, we're going to go to lunch with our IP attorney. And I was like, okay, I'm in sales. Why am I doing that? Doesn't sound like a good use of time. And Grant said, because one day when you're running your own software company, you're going to need to understand the importance of legal in your contracts and in protecting your intellectual property. My personal experience by having a mentor and a sponsor like Grant Willard is he put me in positions to learn the things I would need 3 to 5 years in advance of when I would need them. So my personal perspective on inclusive leadership is somebody that was really, truly not only mentoring me, giving me coaching, but sponsoring me, which is access, door opening, and helping me pursue new opportunities for growth in a particular market. And as we look at some of the moments on my leadership journey where I had to learn how to become more inclusive, I'll tell you this simple and very direct perspective. As an inclusive leader, we need to learn how to ask more questions and make less statements. As leaders, when we walk into a room, if we make a statement about a particular issue, if we share our opinion too early in the dialogue, that opinion then gets reinforced in the echo chamber because people are still hierarchical in the way they think about ideas and leadership and saying yes to the boss. But if we ask questions, if we pull excellence from our team before we weigh in, what we'll find is innovation can thrive, collaboration can thrive. What we find is that our leadership, our goal as an inclusive leader is to create the environment where more people can participate, the environment where people are unafraid to take that risk of sharing their idea in a group setting. Because we know we've created an environment where the best idea wins, whether it's an intern, a C-suite member, a member of the board, or the janitor. When we think about number 5, some of the challenges that leaders face in striving to be more inclusive and how we've navigated these challenges, a thought comes to mind of a business leader that I mentor and coach. And one of the challenges is that the time pressures, the financial pressures, he was like, Don, how do I slow down? It feels like it takes longer to be more inclusive when I know the right thing to do. And the way that I described leadership to this gentleman was very clear. If you do it, if you're the only one with the good ideas, then how big a business can you build? Because one person only scales, but so much. If you slow down and cultivate capacity building, building leaders at every level within your organization, then your organization has no limits. Your growth potential is only limited by how much you and your team dream, innovate, win against the competition. As we dial into some practical solutions that has helped us develop inclusive leadership in the environments that I work is number one, we talked about more questions, less statements. Number two, make sure that everyone in the meeting contributes. Usually in meetings, for example, there are folks that are very excited and they want to share what they're thinking. And then there are folks that are maybe a little bit more introverted that could go an entire hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, not say a word. You want to make sure that you give Susie, John, Jacob, who might be a little bit less outgoing, giving them space to contribute. So that's number one. The second thing that is really important in terms of inclusive leadership, and this is where I want to get really practical, send your reading notes, your reading material, and your agenda a day or two in advance. So those that learn differently, those that consume information differently, have a chance to prepare appropriately. And you'll find a higher level of engagement, impact, and collaboration within the organization and within the meeting. Another example of inclusive leadership is how do you share praise? Is it all about I did or all about we did? The more that you share praise for success, the more that you specifically outline things that people have done well in a public setting, in an email. The thing about organizations, companies, corporations is news travels faster than ever. And one of the best ways to become a more inclusive and open leader is to let people know publicly what they've done well. And people will work to emulate that because recognition, praise, specifically attached to a behavior or an outcome will get duplicated. Number 7, one of the things we want to talk about is how inclusive leadership impacts the team's dynamics and performance. When you create an environment that failure is not a death sentence, you'll find that people are willing to open up and be vulnerable about where they need help. A lot of times there's organizational silos and people don't talk to each other because there's a fear of sharing. There's a fear of letting your guard down that you might need some support, some guidance, some help. When you create an environment where failure is not a death sentence in the organization, you create the opportunity for team members to support one another. I was chatting with an individual consultant on my team. This was many, many years ago, and I shared the way I thought that a particular project should go. And I shared it rather forcefully. And the team member looked at me and said, Don, are you all open? He said, are you open to an alternative perspective? I was like, sure. I paused for a minute and then I was like, sure. And he proceeded to share with me a different way, a more profitable way, a less risky way, a smarter way to implement this technology project. 2 things I learned that day. Number one, I was glad that I created an environment where my recommendation could be questioned, even though I was the CEO. Number 2, I appreciated this gentleman asking for space to share the idea in a super cool way. Don, are you open to an alternative point of view? And three, it gave me the ability to show leadership and humility by moving away from my idea and adopting an idea that was stronger from a team member. One of the things you have to do to create breakthroughs in your organization is model the behavior, the leadership behavior that you want to see at every level in your business. And so in this arena, I was able to model that behavior. Number 9, here's some advice that I would give you on developing inclusive leadership habits. A friend of mine, Kurt Merriweather, and I recently wrote a book called The Inclusive Leadership Handbook. And you can get this book by going to thediversitymovement.com/store. And this book is an easy read, but it covers some of the fundamental habits of inclusive leaders. It also has some workbook elements. It also has some exercises and some additional resources that you can go to. But the reason that we wrote this book is because most leaders today are struggling with the balance between empathy and economics. And this book helps you walk that mental model tightrope, if you will. Final item number 10. How do you assess the effectiveness of inclusive leadership? How do you know you're on the right track? Well, a couple things that I do to gauge. And one is formal, one's informal. So formal is read the content of your surveys, your pulse surveys, your exit interviews when people are leaving the organization. Lead by walking around. We're not 100% remote. We're in the office 2 days a week. So I go and check on people, see how their families are doing, see how they're doing. And here's the indicator. Here's an indicator of inclusive leadership. How often are people on your team bringing you new stretch ideas to help transform the organization and problems that they're struggling with that they'd like your advice and support to help overcome? When you're an inclusive leader, your team will bring you problems and opportunities without fear because they know that your goal is to help them recover if they're behind on a goal and win. If it's a great idea, what are the next steps in terms of getting that idea heard, funded, and piloted at the right level? And if it's a spectacular mistake, what are the after action review methods that we can work on together so that we don't make it again? But you can measure inclusivity by the number of times each week your team members bring you challenges. That's one. Second thing, as I stated a moment ago, is in your surveys and your pulse surveys. And you want to gear some of those questions about the leadership style, the engagement. Am I comfortable at work bringing challenges to my boss and supervisor? Seed questions within your feedback loop that give you direct reflection, a inclusive leadership mirror, if you will, on how you're doing within your organization. So today we talked about defining inclusive leadership, which very simply, right, without using a lot of abstract, super big words, inclusive leadership is the leadership approach that creates an environment where all employees feel valued, have the opportunity to contribute, and succeed at work. When we look at how does inclusive leadership differ from other leadership practices? It really doesn't, as much as it is more amplified now, more acceptable now to be both empathetic and economic. We talked about Grant, my mentor, being able to expose me to leadership training, and people. And then when I think about my journey as an inclusive leadership, I think about the moments where I had to learn how to ask more questions versus making statements. One of the things about being an inclusive leader, and we cover this in the Inclusive Leadership Handbook, the answer is not what you do, but the environment that you create to help others win in your organization. And by default, help you recruit, reward, and retain the best in class talent. Because people know that if they succeed within your organization, you're not only going to create more recognition, more mentorship, more sponsorship, like we discussed, you're going to help people grow in their career, grow personally, and help the organization win. Inclusive leadership is not a nice to have. It is a critical component to competitive advantage in the new economy. One of the reasons high octane leadership was started was that blend between empathy and economics that leaders were struggling. How could you be a high octane leader and still love and care and put in that extra time for the well-being of your team? It's not easy to do, but it's worth it. Final thought. I was reading a quote by Sundar Pichai, who's the CEO of Google. A diverse mix of voices leads to better discussions, better decisions, and better outcomes for everyone. Don't let the noise of the moment get us all sidetracked on what diversity is, what inclusion is, what wellness is, what well-being is. Our goal is to create a better workplace for all. And inclusive leadership is a critical component in meeting that goal. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Hope this helped. Get your copy of the Inclusive Leadership Handbook. DT, over and out. Thank you for joining us on High Octane Leadership with Donald Thompson. Today's episode is a step in our collective journey towards leadership excellence. Remember, every story we share and every insight we gain is a piece in the puzzle of our leadership journey. For more insight and detail, hit the subscribe button so that we can stay connected. For deeper information and more episodes, go to donaldthompson.com. Continue to lead with vision and purpose, and until we meet again, embrace your role as a high-octane leader in the ever-evolving world of business.